All right, we are recording the meeting. This meeting will be available on our YouTube webpage after it is concluded and posted, probably tomorrow. Thank you all for calling in. I'm going to go ahead and call the membership. Ben Baker with the PSC, that's me. I am present. Do we have Senator Hettleman? Senator Watson? Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo? Delegate Allen?
I am here.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Department of Ag, Allison.
I'm here, and Rachel will not be attending
Rachel.
today.
Are you filling in for her today?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. Let's see, Kim with the Comptroller's Office.
Present.
Thank you. Amanda is out, but with MDOT, but she said Virginia is filling in for her. She's having trouble joining. Give me the phone number. All right. Virginia determines how she's getting in. MEA.
Diego is having some trouble joining in, but he'll be here in 5 minutes.
Okay. We will have Diego though. All right. Scott Wilson.
Present.
Thank you, Scott. Paul, I believe, is on vacation. Josh?
Present.
Owen. Thank you. Matt?
Here.
And Virginia, were you able to join?
Yes, and can you hear me?
I can. Welcome aboard.
Okay, and here for MDOT, but in Amanda Hinn's place today since she's out sick.
All good. All right. Thank you everyone for calling in. I believe we may also have Senator Hettleman joining for the second half of the meeting. She had a conflict. So before we get going, a couple housekeeping items. Yeah, so they said today, as you probably saw on the agenda, Amanda was actually one of the two who I thought was going to be joining late. So next week we have MDOT for the whole thing. But then, yeah, Senator Hettleman may join it towards the second half. And so I prioritized educational material for the first half of this meeting and the deliberative material for the second half. Also, members of the public and or organizations that aren't official members. I'm going to try something a little new this time from the last meeting. On subjects where your input would be valuable, I may open the floor for you to provide feedback during the meeting on those topics, time permitting, and typically after members have had their opportunity to weigh in. I will make an exception on that today for the EVSE business model discussion, since you all have unique businesses, and I will give you an opportunity to talk about what those businesses are. But trying to allow for more interactive feedback as we go, but that will be subject to time limits, and I will always try and preserve 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the meeting for public comments in general. And then also those who are not members, please put your name and affiliation in the chat so we can record that. And then also one other thing for the non-members, we also will, if you have written feedback on anything you hear in a meeting, please send me an email with it and I will circulate it to everyone who's an official member so they can know your thoughts as well, because we want to make sure we're capturing everything that's going on. So for today, we will be, oh, hold on. Today sorry, I'm having to do something weird. Today we will be discussing, we will have the agencies present on what their current roles on EVSEs are with, currently with EVSEs, and at the end of that, the MDA, Maryland Department of Agriculture, will also talk about their role through Handbook 44, which is something they already have to be doing. Then after that, we'll take time to discuss EVS business models and how they make money, so that when we're discussing enforcement of these rules, we can touch on that. Then after that, we'll spend a significant portion of time talking through the draft framework that was previously circulated to members. And then I want to reserve some time at the end to walk through NEVI uptime rules and also utility uptime rules, since that's the next set of things that we will be covering as a group, and we'll be asking parties to think about over time. So before we get going, any questions on any of that? All right, before I start off with those presentations, Delegate Allen, would you like to say anything to the group? I know this was one of your bills from last year, and you weren't able to join us in the first meeting.
Yes, first of all, I want to apologize for missing the first meeting. Second of all, I want to apologize in advance for any weird sounds you hear in the background. My dogs are not behaving. So all that being said, no, I really appreciate everybody coming together. The original version of this bill was not actually a work group. It was just kind of directing the comptroller's office to start to put in place regulations and consumer protections. And we realized really quickly that the original version actually left out a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders, and a lot of really important voices that need to be listened to and that should have a role, like our friends at the PSC and the Department of Agriculture. So I'm really, really happy with the final version, the final makeup of this work group. And I'm really excited to see everybody come together and get to work. So I just want to thank everybody in advance for their hard work and partnership, which is one of the governor's favorite words. And I'm excited to get this done.
Thank you. See here. All right. So let me pull up my slides. I'll go ahead and kick it off for the state agencies. Pulling up my slide right now. All right. Okay. Alrighty. So let's see here. So the PSC, how we are involved with EVSEs today. We, the PSC, we oversee all electric and gas utilities in the state and other utilities, but those are the relevant ones for this call, mostly the electric ones. And generally, we're ensuring safe, reliable, and economic service that is coming from them. We've interacted with EVs. Our interaction with EVs has primarily spanned from our work group, our work for the utility pilots over the last 5 to 6 years, where our utilities have provided various incentive structures and rebates to customers to, I guess, either purchase EVs or to change their charging behaviors, in terms of how they interact with the grid. So those incentives have included giving money to customers to help them purchase EVSE equipment. It has included smart charging, time of use rates. It has included, I guess, and that is built in private use and public use. So our utilities also own their own public charging stations, which led to a bill last year, actually in the 2023 session, where that required the utilities to maintain their stations. One second, I'm going to mute somebody. Whoever is the 443 number ending in 30, you are cutting in and out of our meeting. Thank you. Anyway, so that required us to create reliability standards for the utility stations in terms of uptime. So we actually did a deep dive on a lot of the issues that you'll be talking about today. And I think a number of people who are both on this group as official members and those who will be monitoring this group and providing feedback over time also had a heavy hand in those. And those rules went to the commission last October, who then issued an order this January telling the utilities how they wanted them to measure uptimes. And the commission is currently reviewing. It should be ending it very soon, a release of an order telling the utilities, approving the utilities' current plan for this year to measure uptime. And so that's kind of led to us being intimately involved with this work group since we've done it once before, but now we're looking at all charging stations, not just utility-owned ones. Other places that we have been intimate, we are involved with EVs are the EV school bus pilot. We have 2 applications in front of us, so I can't talk much about them right now, but that will have a vehicle to grid component. And so that should be pretty interesting. More to come on those. And we also deal with rate setting interconnection. So I would say we're obviously going to be involved no matter what happens at the end of the day here, mostly because you need the utility infrastructure for the EVSEs to work. And so whether that be the utility own the station or they own the equipment leading to the station, will be there one way or the other. All right, that's my presentation. And let's see who goes next. Any questions for me while I switch this over to MDOT? Okay, Virginia, you're up.
Yep. And Ben, I think Amanda sent you slides maybe, or
Yes,
am I
if you give
sharing
me a
hers?
second.
Okay.
Look, apparently, I have to. Do you have them on? Do you have them on you?
Yes, which means I'd have to share them. Give me a second how to do that.
I just made you the presenter.
Let's see. Give me a sec.
It'd be easier. I can also dig.
You know what? Surely this is here. If it's easier for you, I think I do want you to do it.
All right, let's see if I.
Sorry. Only that the interface of these things is always so different.
I don't have it. I only have
You
the
don't.
workbook. Yeah, I just
Okay.
have the workbook beside me. Sorry.
Give me 1 second then. I will do this again. Let me just not share the wrong thing inadvertently. Where is it? No,
So
I'm
good,
sorry.
Virginia.
I'm
What are you?
sharing. This is so silly. Like,
Here it is. You have something on the screen.
I'm the wrong thing. This is definitely a
All right.
problem when we have too many slides up.
All good.
Okay. One more time. Got rid of my excess PowerPoints.
On deck will be the office of comptroller. If you want to have your slides ready, if you have slides.
All right. This is maddening. Ben, it is not there.
You want me to go to the office of comptroller and then come back to you, Virginia?
Yes, do that. I'll
All
figure
right,
this out
we'll
while
do
you're
it.
going.
No worries. Go ahead, Kim, with office comptroller, any of your people.
Hi everyone, how are you doing? Sorry, I missed last meeting because I was out of office and I just returned today, so we don't have slides. But we just have one paragraph that we'll share with you about the overview of our agency's responsibilities related to EVs in Maryland. And this comes from our Department of Compliance, which I'm not in. So I won't be able to answer any questions about this, but I'll share it with you all. So the Office of the Comptroller is responsible for the collection and distribution of taxes, specifically the 2024 Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, which requires the sales use tax revenue attributable to the sale of electricity at an electric vehicle charging station or used to charge an EV and is not sold under a residential or domestic rate schedule to be distributed to the Transportation Trust Fund. These businesses would be subject to the same audit, collection, and enforcement efforts as any other sales tax account. Where the electricity is subject to sales tax, the entity would need the Maryland sales use tax account and file and pay sales tax. They would be subject to sales tax audits, and they would be subject to other collection activities such as license revocation hearings, garnishments, offsets, etc.
Thank you, Kim. So do you, just really quick to the group, do you do any on-site audits of any of these, of any charging equipment or gas stations today? Or is it all simply they need to, anyone who pays taxes need to make sure that they just simply follow the rules and send you the money?
I can hop in, Kim. Hi, everyone. This is Diamond Wade from the Comptroller's Office. Let me actually start my video so you guys can see me. So the Comptroller's Field Enforcement Bureau collects samples of like motor fuel from terminals and retail locations. So at gas stations, our work with EVs is pretty much non-existent, but we do go to gas stations and things of that nature to collect samples of the gas oil, in that regard. If that's what you were asking, I feel like it was. I just want to make sure I
No,
answered.
yeah, I think and that's interesting. Because yeah, as we work through this, we'll have to figure out who will take what responsibility. And you obviously were the delegate's natural choice to have this responsibility. Just thinking about how this might translate, if it makes sense for you to take over. Too. But anyways, we'll feel into that more as it keeps going. But yeah. Any other questions for the Office of Comptroller?
I do just want to say that I think that there's somebody else needs to mute. Sorry, that needs to mute. Initially, we were considered to be the ones still getting feedback. I think. Anyway, we're open to having this discussion about who will be more in charge of this, as I don't believe that it is actually our office in the end, except for the sales use tax portion, of course.
Yep, understood. Thanks, Kim. And then Scott, I put you on mute, but you can unmute. I see you have a hand up.
Okay, yeah. I think Diamond answered my question. I just wanted to make clear that, to clarify, the Comptroller's Office collects gas taxes and then sends them to the Transportation Trust Fund in the same way that they do with the EV chargers.
Kim or Diamond, does the Comptroller's Office send money to the after you collect the taxes? Are you the entity that sends that fund to the Transportation Trust Fund?
I only know what I said, which is that as of right now, the EV starting July 1st of 2020, it will go to that fund, but previously, but I'm not sure about gas taxes.
I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. I was trying to talk, but I had responsible for that. Our general accounting division will be responsible to making sure that the funds are distributed to the transportation fund. That is in the bill, the language of the bill. Can you all hear me? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I can. Okay, perfect. But I just wanted to clarify, are you doing that function now for gas stations, for the gas tax?
That I would not be able to answer, but I will say that our general accounting division general administration division does do that. GAD division does do that for certain. If there's language within a bill that requires the comptroller to remit taxes and then distribute it to a particular fund, we do that.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thanks. Virginia, are you able to go now?
Yep. Okay.
All right.
Do it one more time. Hopefully this works this time.
All right, I'm going to give you should have presentation authority.
Okay, why is it not? Okay. Visible?
Yes.
Yes, we can see your
This
screen.
is visible. Okay. I can now no longer see you guys, but that's okay. let me just walk through these couple slides. So again, Virginia Burke, Maryland Department of Transportation, in the Office of Environment and Sustainable Transportation. Just a couple things about our role in EV space. So generally, when it comes to overarching role is, of course, our transportation network and highways. And so vehicle electrification and charging infrastructure on those networks and highways is our role. Our purpose and mission is making transportation Maryland more green. On this one particularly, I'll say where we started work about 2 years ago was coming up with the NEVI plan. So NEVI is National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. And so that's a federal program, and the federal program requires MDOT or the state to create a plan for how to utilize those NEVI funds. And I will talk about that a little more on the next slide. Other parts of our role is for the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Council, or ZEVIC. MDOT chairs the council and also staffs the council. That's been in place since 2011, created by state legislation. The members of it are appointed by either governor or by legislature. And that is right now being convened on a quarterly basis. And that is for generally for state as a whole to develop policies and recommendations and advise on incentives to increase ZEV awareness and also ZEV adoption in the state. And a number of ZEVIC members are, of course, on this work group as well. State agencies are also represented on ZEVIC. And third, we maintain MarylandEV.org. What that is a consumer-facing website with education and outreach material to support ZEV adoption and ZEV proliferation. That was written into the requirements for ZEVIC, that sort of education outreach work gets stood up and maintained, and so we do that. MDOT does. MarylandEV.org, it's now a platform. We just really put almost anything on there that has relation to ZEV policies, incentives, really kind of anything that comes in front of ZEVIC. Also has a place on MarylandEV.org. We do social media. At times we've done paid media campaigns, and we've also at times sent people out to events and festivals around the state to promote EVs. So those are our big three. Back to NEVI. And did that slide just move to slide 2? Did it change? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So NEVI, the IIJA bill back in 2021 created the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program and directed MDOT to deploy $60 million in those funds to build out charging infrastructure in the state. In our first and early commitment was to build out the highway corridors, specifically the alternative fuel corridors. We've just completed round 1 awards, which awarded the first 12 million of the 60. And that is along the way towards getting all those highway corridors that you see in the image there electrified with DC fast charging installed every 50 miles within 1 mile of those highway exits. And once the highways are fully built out, then any remaining funds can go to other sort of secondary NEVI priorities, one being community charging, so charging installations just around the state, and also is eligible for medium and heavy duty charging. So that our work to get the NEVI funds out has continued. Also under NEVI, the discretionary part of the funding, which is the EVSE WG is our acronym, how we're saying it now, but so the EV Charging Reliability, Accessibility, and Accelerator program, that is also what we call the Broken Charger Grant funding program. Or the end of last year, we applied for and received 4.36 million in funds, and are working now with partners to get those funds deployed also to get broken chargers repaired. And finally, our last piece is that we maintain an EV dashboard that has a variety of EV related metrics. We do every month what are our total EV registrations. We are now a little over 108,000, but also other things, how many charging ports, where are they, and then ratios, ports per population, vehicles per population, that sort of thing. Also on the EV dashboard, we've set up an EV charger grant, an EV charger siting tool, and that's to help people apply for funds, specifically federal funds where an equity analysis is needed. That has really become a requirement for all federal funds, and the siting tool that we stood up brings in many equity layers to do that analysis. And my third and final slide is only just some links to all those things I mentioned: ZVIC, Maryland EV, the NEVI plan, and our EV dashboard and siting tool. And I will take this down so I can see the screen again, Ben, because right now I'm speaking to a black screen for some reason.
All good. Thank you, Virginia. Any questions for Virginia?
I have one
I
real
know.
quick. Yeah, do we know what charging all the federal program and such are they prescriptive at all about the charging standard?
Oh yes, yes.
That's what I was gonna. If you could elaborate a little bit on that just for the group, thank you.
They are. I would be happy to. But Ben, let me ask you. I think maybe the last maybe half hour or so of the meeting is looking at that somewhat closely, the federal minimum requirements that we do have to follow for NEVI.
Yes, but if you want to just give a quick 1-minute pitch as a teaser for the group, go for it.
I will give a 1-minute pitch and
Yeah.
teaser only to say, right, the NEVI minimum requirements and standards were released. And what that applies to all federal funding, whether it be NEVI funds or some of these other sources like climate pollution reduction grants or carbon reduction program or CMAQ funding, congestion mitigation, air quality. And if it's federal money, it has to conform with the federal minimum standards and requirements. And there has been at least one sort of update to those issued that I just was looking at the other day. There may be others. And I think, yes, that's going to be quite important to the work of this work group. So MDOT's position has been, to the greatest extent possible, we can align the state requirements and the federal. We think that'll be the sort of most seamless and sort of easy to follow for the EV sector as a whole. So yes, important question. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. There's no other questions. I'm going to go ahead and go over to MEA, and then we'll finish up with the comptroller's office. Or not the comptroller, the Maryland Department of Ag. So was Diego able to? There he is. Hey, Diego.
And it looks like you'll need to give me also permission to share.
You should have it now.
Let's see here. Alrighty, sharing the screen or seeing the presentation?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Perfect, perfect. So yeah, just going over MEA's role. My name is Diego Lopez. I'm the section chief for clean transportation and innovation. We have a bunch of our team members here as well, so we can answer a lot of your questions on these programs. But just a high overview, we run first our rebate program, our electric vehicle supply equipment rebate program. It's for both residential and commercial charging stations, anywhere from $700 to $5,000. So it's typically around 50% of that total cost. It covers both the installation and the charging equipment. We also have some grants that we just completed, and I'll give some additional information here. But that first grant is the medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicle grant. And just like it entails, it really is supporting those really medium and heavy duty vehicles. So anything 9,000 pounds and above. And we'll go over what we've funded recently. We also have the Open Energy Grants Program. So filling in all of the gaps that we see for electrification, whether it's maybe vehicle to grid, whether it's maybe helping more local governments. That Open Grants is a really great tool to really develop some different solutions, some innovative solutions So it's around 250,000 per program, per project. We also have some programs for technical assistance and to gain some federal funding. Natalie is our Clean Cities Coalition Director, and she runs our Maryland Clean Cities and Communities Coalition. Does a lot of technical assistance. And in fact, and we'll put into the chat, Maryland Clean Cities will be hosting, along with all of the other agencies, and we'll be putting in their logos soon, an electric vehicle webinar series, an EV 101, an EVSE 101, and even an EV 101 for fleet electrification. So we'll send that webinar out very soon. We also have the Empower program. So again, more technical assistance specifically for workplace charging. They can still capitalize on the EVSE program for the actual rebate, but a lot of times they're needing some additional education and outreach. And through that Empower program, it's a really great way to certify the workplace and then get highlighted by the Department of Energy. It's a national program, so we always like to promote that. We will have some future programming as well. One for school bus electrification, so helping school buses. We're currently designing that and gaining some feedback. We're also designing our multifamily unit EVSE program, so slightly different than our EVSE program. We're really trying to tackle a lot of the issues that multifamily units face. Sometimes they don't have parking, so we may have to think about street parking. Some have large parking lots, so we have to think about different levels of charging stations. So again, we're gaining a lot of feedback currently, and if anybody has notes or feedback about those programs, do let us know. We have some really great EVSE rebate statistics, some other really great summary through our other programs. Prateeksha's on the call, so we can dive deeper. What I like to highlight is that we capture a lot of data about the overall average cost of the installation of the charging equipment, and then how much our rebate is covering. So if anybody has questions on, generally how much these EV projects are costing, do let us know, and we can send some information out. But lastly, and this is, really new, we're really going to be sending out a much more detailed press release, but I wanted to share it at least with this working group. This is the list of our past awardees for our MHD program. We literally are just awarding them now. It's close to around $8.6 million. 45 plus vehicles were awarded. As you can see, a lot of on-road heavy-duty vehicles, but we've also funded a lot of off-road vehicles, tractor trailers, some school buses already. So we'll be able to share a lot of best practices from these fleets onto the others. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing here, but let me know if you all have any questions, and thank you all so much.
Any questions for Diego? All right. Allison, I believe it is your turn. Do you want me to give you presenter ability?
Yes, please.
All right, you should have it.
Right, everyone. My slideshow is going to discuss Maryland Department of Agriculture weights and measures, EVFS roles and responsibilities. It'll give us some background on our program to begin with. So currently we already have regulatory authority. Essentially any device that's used in a commercial transaction is required to not only comply with the National Conference on Weights and Measures, specifications and tolerances, technical requirements in Handbook 44, But we also register these devices used in commercial transactions. So registration required, basically buying or selling any commodity or object, hire or award, computing any charge or payment for services rendered on the basis of weight and measurement, or determining any weight or measure for a charge. This would include electric vehicle charging equipment. Currently, these are the device registration categories that we have. So our device registration categories are set within state statute. This is how our department is funded. So as you can see, we have everything from small capacity scales up to railroad and vehicle scales, green moisture meters. And then you can see different metering devices, retail motor fuel devices, which are your gas pumps, up to 20 gallons per minute. You can see the ones over 20 gallons per minute, such as the devices used to fuel trucks at truck stops, as well as your bulk petroleum fuel meters that are vehicle mounted, loading rack meters, liquefied petroleum gas meters, and point of sale systems. So eventually in the future, our department would like to add an additional device registration category for electric vehicle fueling equipment. That way we can assess fees appropriately to fund the inspection activities of these devices. So basically, what does Maryland Department of Agriculture Weights and Measures do? We ensure equity in the marketplace between consumers and businesses. We register devices used in direct transactions with consumers. We test, inspect, and certify these devices using specifications and tolerances found in NIST Handbook 44. We respond to and investigate consumer complaints per 11-206. We ensure devices are legal for trade, which is NTEP. We touched base a little bit on that previously. So NTEP stands for the National Type Evaluation Plan. We ensure that they're suitable for the application in which they're being used. POMAR 15.03.09, approval and type evaluation requirements, and the authority in the Agricultural Code 11-204.1 and 11-207.1, Annotated Code of Maryland, grants the authority to ensure that our devices are NTEP or legal for trade. We regulate the method of sale of all commodities sold by weight, measure, count. And additionally, we have the ability to condemn and remove incorrect devices from service per 11-207. So how is Weights and Measures funded? MDA Weights and Measures, field operations, and metrology lab are funded through device registration fees. Fees are collected annually. Certificates of registration are valid from June 1st, the calendar year, through May 31st of the following year. We register legal for trade devices by business location, type of device, and number of each devices in use. This is reflected on the certificate of registration, which is required by law to be displayed conspicuously within the place of business. So Maryland Department of Agriculture Field Operations, Weights and Measures has a total of 18 field staff positions actively involved in the test and inspection of over 66,000 registered devices throughout the state of Maryland. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, EPOs are followed for test procedures. That's how we actually test our devices, following the prescribed test procedures. The field staff follow NIST Handbook 44 for the specifications, tolerances, and technical requirements in testing inspection of these devices. Test data is recorded by registered business location and device and stored in the Maryland Department of Agriculture Weights and Measures SQL database. That way, if we ever need to pull an inspection, we're able to pull and see exactly what the findings was of the device, that particular device. So MDA Weights and Measures role in electric vehicle fueling systems. MDA Weights and Measures currently has the authority to register, inspect, test, and certify these devices. However, appropriate fees will need to be established to purchase test standards, increase staffing, and fund field inspection activities. So 11-204.1.B3 charge the appropriate fees established under subsection E of this section in order to cover the cost of inspecting or testing any weight measures provided by this section. So hopefully in the future, we'll be establishing the appropriate fees to be able to fund our inspection activities and purchase the standards and increase field staffing. So how will MDA Weights and Measures register these devices? Electric vehicle chargers will be registered by location and device owner. So if, say, Tesla owns the actual chargers, just for an example, and it's located on 50 Harry S. Truman Parkway, that would be by location and device owner. There will be assigned an account number. Then device information at each location, such as make, model, and serial number, number of charging points, and the level of the charger would be noted. So inspectors will inspect and test these devices and certify them. So in accordance with NIST Handbook 44, Section 3.40. Electric vehicle fueling systems will ensure consumers are receiving the amount that they are paying for. The devices are within tolerance and functioning as designed. The devices are legal for trade. Respond to and investigate consumer complaints involving EV chargers, and ensure the transaction is computed properly, and the consumers are charged accordingly and receive a recorded representation of the transaction. Weights and Measures will remove from service any charger that does not meet tolerances, specifications, and technical requirements as specified in NIST Handbook 44. A device that is not functioning as designed. A device that is not legal for trade. A device that is directly involved in a valid consumer complaint. So if we find, if a consumer calls and has a specific complaint on a device and we find it to be valid, we will remove it from service. Note, a device cannot be returned to service until it is found to be accurate and correct. So it can't just be returned to service. Someone can't just walk out and decide to return it to service. We need to ensure these devices are accurate and correct. The same we would do with a gas pump or grocery store scale. So going into NIST Handbook 44, 3.40. Electric vehicle fueling systems. Some of the specifications, without going in too specific, we would enforce the primary indicating and recording elements. Essentially, you've got to be able to see your transaction. You have to see essentially the amount of kilowatts being delivered to you. It has to have an indicator. EVSE operating requirements. So some of the operating requirements would be returned to zero, just like a gas pump will be returned to zero before you start the transaction. You're going to want the delivery of your kilowatts to be at zero before the next transaction has started. Provisions for power loss, transaction termination, and such. And indication of the unit price, because everyone needs to know what the actual price they're paying for. No different than if you're paying $3.49.9 per gallon. The consumer is going to need to know the amount that they're paying per kilowatt hour. Design of measuring elements and measuring systems. So essentially, this is a prevention of fraud to ensure that these devices can't be tampered with and altered. So additionally, connections, that's going to ensure that there's no diversion of the measured electricity, that when it is being paid for the consumer, it goes directly to the consumer's vehicle that it's hooked into. Markings, it's going to be identification marking requirements such as the voltage rating, the maximum deliverable amperes, the type of current, AC, DC, or if capable of both, shall be listed. The MMQ, which is the minimum measured quantity. Those are some of the marking requirements. It has to have the ability I'm sorry, I skipped HID. To be able to give you a printed representation if you shall request. It has to have a totalizer for the EVSE system overall, and it has to have a minimum measured quantity that's displayed as well. So typically with AC, it's about 0.5 kilowatt hours. With DC, it's 1 kilowatt hours. So those are some of the specifications that we would regulate. Moving into tolerances, tolerances generally apply to both areas of under registration and over registration, which means even if the charger is giving the consumer extra kilowatts and it's found to be over registering, where you still have to protect the businesses, so that device would still be removed from service until repaired. So test load tolerances, acceptance tolerance currently in Handbook 44 is going to be 1%, with maintenance tolerance being 2%. So the difference between acceptance tolerance and maintenance tolerance, acceptance tolerances are applied when a device is placed into initial service within 30 days or returned to service following repair within 30 days. All their devices outside that 30-day window will fall under the 2% tolerances. However, just this past week at the National Conference on Weights and Measures, it was voted upon that any DC device installed before January 1st of 2025 will have a tolerance of 5%. That will go into effect in Handbook 44 on January 1st of this year. So moving on to the user requirements, you have selection requirements such as the computing type devices, connection and cord length. There's specific requirements that are specified when it comes to these particular areas. Installation requirements such as the maximum deliverable current and responsibilities of unintended EVSE devices, which they're pretty much unattended. Use of EVSE, such as display of pricing, so that's your kilowatt pricing, your return to zero, because once again, all devices, whether it's a scale, gas pump, or EV dispenser, is required to return to zero before the next transaction begins. Your recorded representations, which could be delivered by email, depending upon how you request or through your app. It's required to be able to deliver the total transaction and your recorded representation, and whether the EVSE is in operation. What MDA weights and measures will not do is we will not regulate EV infrastructure, will not regulate rates or pricing associated with electricity transactions, that it's clearly marked. Register or regulate privately owned devices or devices not used in commercial transaction to establish a charge. MDA weights and measures will registered service agencies, so I know this is a little far out. However, we will regulate the service industry just like we regulate the service industry with scales and other liquid measuring devices. Per COMAR 15.03.11, qualifications for registered service technicians and agencies. The authority is granted through 11-203A3 in the Annotated Code of Maryland. Register agencies and technicians that are installing, calibrating, placing into service, and repairing EVFE devices. So these agencies will be required to register with us. Technicians will be required to notify weights and measures by sending in an official placed into service report within 5 days, anytime a device is placed into service or repaired and returned to service. Additionally, these technicians will be required to take and pass a test ensuring that they understand the requirements, not only in NIST Handbook 44, but Maryland COMAR. And that is it. I know that's a lot of information, so hopefully that is helpful.
It is, Allison. Thank you. We'll want to move on pretty quick, but I do want to take some questions. I actually had a couple of my own. Just really quick to clarify a couple things you said. First, one of your slides, I think was around page 10 or 11, weights and measures will, and it your rules were for devices not functioning as designed.
Yes.
I wanted to just clarify with that statement, do you mean the scale or effectively the metering equipment is not functioning as designed, or is this going further than that and stuff that is, I would argue, is straight up broken? like
If it's
the
broken, we would remove it
screens.
from service because we're not able to certify a broken device.
Okay, interesting. Right. So like when like let's say an EVSE has a broken screen, but somebody can with that, but they have a number for somebody that they could call to initiate the charge at the device. Would you consider that to be not functioning as designed?
That is correct because it's required to have an indication per NIST Handbook 44.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to go to a gas pump and just because you can receive the receipt on an app, would you feel comfortable starting a transaction, not being able to see the screen on a gas pump and knowing it started at zero? What happened if I already started out charging you $1, at the beginning of the transaction and you had no idea because you couldn't see the indicator? So that's a condemnable offense for a gas pump or scale or vehicle scale from the very beginning. So therefore, we would handle it exactly the same because that device is not functioning as designed.
Okay. No, that's good to know. Yeah, there'll be more discussions, I think, around what you just presented relative to the uptime discussion, because there's a lot of cross pollination right there. Anyways, I will open it up to others now because I know we need to move on to other topics. Go ahead, Josh.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Allison. That was a really informative presentation. I had a couple questions, one of which was, I think your second to last slide, it said that MDA will not regulate EV infrastructure or something like that. And can you just explain that a bit more so to make sure I understand it?
We're not in charge of how the actual infrastructure set, how the actual power gets to the dispensers itself, or how the actual systems are installed. We'd only regulate how the actual dispensers itself are installed and how they are actually functioning.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I don't want, Ben, I don't want to take up a lot of time now because I know this is just the initial presentation, but just thinking ahead to like the work of this group and making recommendations, this topic of metering accuracy and inspections and registration fees and all that is one that not a lot of states have done a lot of work on, and but there's a lot to it, obviously, both from the driver perspective, also from the EV charging provider perspective to make sure it's workable. So I just want to put a pin in this that I hope we come back to this.
Oh, yes, no, thank you for that. And I pretty much can guarantee we will, because I didn't realize how much cross there was between the NEVI standards and discussions around uptime and what MDA just brought out with the with Handbook 44. And my understanding is NIST and the Handbook 44 is a national standard, and so this is probably going to roll out across the industry. So I think that's also something that we should all think about, because I think originally NEVI was getting a lot of deference, but this seems like it will be a game changer on some of that. So something we should all talk about. So yes, Josh, this is definitely only the beginning.
Thanks.
All right, Scott.
Yeah, there was a printer requirement, so the device has to have a printer. Could that requirement be satisfied with like a printed receipt on a cell phone app? So after your charging session, you get okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So a lot of the wording's been changed in the handbook in the past year when it comes to printed ticket. For years, it was called a printed ticket. Now they're referring to these particular areas as recorded representations, depending on the agreement between the consumer and the business.
Okay.
Or the device itself.
Okay. All right, thanks.
With technology involving in apps and the ability to initiate transactions through your telephone and different rewards programs, even at a gas pump, you can initiate a transaction by scanning a QR code. We've changed a lot of our wording to kind of reflect the evolution of technology and statements of recorded representations.
Okay.
And then Allison, one last thing before we move on. When you say take it out of service, I believe when we talked about this a long time ago, you mentioned that gas pumps, you physically take the pump away from the station if they are, like, you give them some warnings, and then if they don't comply, you pull it. Is a
So
similar thought going through your head with the electric connectors, or what is your what was the discussion around that at your last meeting?
So we have a couple different levels of enforcement area, but the most common one that will be used due to the type of devices EV chargers are would be taking wiring and putting a yellow tag on it that says condemned. So they do have the ability. My understanding is that these devices are not going to be easily repaired in the field. A lot of them are just going to be replaced. It's not quite like a gas pump. You wouldn't replace the entire gas pump unless there's some significant issues, such as it had been hit by a car on the road or the whole station was due for an upgrade. But the EV chargers are a little bit different. So these devices would be condemned, and if for some reason they're able to repair these devices, that's fine. A registered service agency can let our department know within 5 days and sign the affirmation of repair. We would go out and certify that the actual corrections have been made appropriately. Or when they replace the dispenser and put a new dispenser in the ground. But we do have the ability to reject, condemn, or red tag devices. And I think the most common action with these particular devices would be to condemn. That way it gives the registered service agency the ability to repair something if it is at all repairable. But if not, they have the ability to replace these devices and notify us that corrections have been made appropriately.
Thank you. All right, so no other questions. We're going to go ahead and jump into the EVSE business model. I'm going to make this one probably a little shorter since we did run over, but I think that discussion regarding Handbook 44 was really important. Alex, are you still online? Let's see. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Alex, and you can just start talking.
Okay, I have bad Wi-Fi connection, so if at all you can't hear me, put it in the chat or something like that, and I'll try my best. So, yes, so let's get into it. So basically, hi, I'm Alex, I'm an intern. I was asked to look into the kind of business models behind EV charging infrastructure, because the idea is that, with gas infrastructure as it currently is, if a gas station breaks down, there's a market mechanism that market forces would, pressure the gas station operator to say, hey, I need to fix this as soon as possible. And something might be breaking down in the business model behind EV chargers that is preventing that same kind of mechanism from happening, potentially. So it's and I'll get into that. Basically, EV chargers are not working. There was a much cited San Francisco study where people went around the Bay Area of San Francisco, tried to charge an EV, a test EV, and found that only 72.5% of chargers actually function. A study by TD Power, and we also are seeing a discrepancy between the registered uptime and actual charger functionality. So again, the San Francisco study said only 72.5% of chargers were actually functional, even though the charging companies in the area were registering a 95 or 97% uptime. And this kind of reliability challenge deters potential EV customers, according to a report by Consumer Reports and also another JD Power study. Okay, next slide, and I'm going quickly because I understand we're in a time crunch. Basically, there are three potential theories behind why charging reliability issues have stuck around. So on slide 3, you see there's the historical argument, business models, as we mentioned, and then also data collection difficulties from the EV charger infrastructure itself. So let's move on to historical context. I'm just going to say this very, very quickly, slide 5, to say that EV chargers, as they're currently designed, are often unstaffed. They're in isolated and exposed areas, in the parking lot kind of charger paradigm. This is, while it lowers initial capital expenditures, you don't have to build like an awning over the charger. You don't have to, have a staff member there to ensure that the charger's working and yield people towards the charger. It also means that reliability issues go unresolved for longer. Chargers are exposed to the elements frequently. And again attended that, it's harder to see when a charger gets broken, if it's vandalism or something like that. Second historical development that kind of contributes to the charging paradigm that we're seeing today is the fact that two of the largest EV charging companies, EVgo and Electrify America, were created out of settlement agreements. And there's an idea in the industry that although things might be different now, when they were initially starting out, there's a sentiment that these companies kind of check boxes of the settlements rather than consumer base, which would have involved implementing procedures and policies for ensuring reliable charges to make sure that customers actually come to your chargers. I'm going to go, that's very brief overview. I want to move on to the next slide because of time. So Ben, slide 7, if you will. So let's go into the primary business models for EV charging. There's the host owner model, owner operator model, charging as a service model, and other models. Again, going very quickly, I'm just going to give a super high level of these for time reasons. So the host owner model on the next slide, basically a site host wants to, in this model, a site host wants to install an EV charger. So they contacted an EV charging company. They say, hey, I would like to purchase the charger. They purchase the charger, they pay for the installation of the charger. But in return, they are able to collect the revenues from the charger's utilization. So they get revenues from EV drivers who are wanting to charge at the charging station. They can set the price of the electricity at the charging station, primary business model. So the effect on reliability is that the site host, when it's responsible for the EV charger, if the charger utilization actually turns out to be low, the cost of repair might be very high if it breaks down. And in the case where charger utilization is low, it might actually not make business sense for a site host to pay for the repair or replacement of the charger to get it back up and operating. It just doesn't make as much revenue as predicted or as hoped, and the costs outweigh the benefits for repair. When under warranty, it's different. The EV charging company is responsible for the repairs, but again, like communication, sometimes site hosts can't tell whether on warranty or not, etc. Confusion might create delays in communication to delay charger repair. Okay, that's overview. Let's get on to the next one. So now let's move to the owner-operator model. This is where the charging company, this is on slide, yeah, we got it on the slide. The charging company says to a site host, hey, we want to install a charger here. Let us install it and operate it and own it. So basically, instead of the site host collecting revenue from the sale of electricity, this time the owner operator, the charging company, does. They pay for all of the installation, maintenance, electricity, demand charges, etc. And in this, the EV charging company does, because it makes money from charger utilization, there is an incentive when utilization is high enough to say, hey, like, if our charge is broken and we're in a high traffic area, like it makes sense to go out and replace it or repair it. But again, similar to the host-owned model, if the charger is in kind of low traffic area, it doesn't get that much utilization. Once again, it might not make sense necessarily to repair the charger. It just like the costs again outweigh the benefits that they anticipate from such a repair. Okay, next slide, because there's more information, but I want to move through. So next we have the kind of a newer innovative model, the charging as a service model, which basically is kind of like a subscription service for charging. So the site host says, hey, like charging company, build this and operate it and maintain it. We'll do some free site installations to prepare the site for the charger, and we'll pay you a subscription fee. You know, it can be here on the slide, Blink as a service. This is one of the types of the model. Charges an $80 per month subscription fee for kind of all of the services of equipment cost, charger installation, and maintenance. Again, this is there might be some delays in communication between the host and the charging operator. This is a kind of newer model that has less study on its relevance to or impact on charger reliability. So it's kind of the jury's still up on how this may or may not affect charging reliability. And then the last slide in the business model section, we have we have just other models. So the utility ownership model, where the utility owns and operates charging equipment. This is, in the Maryland programmer has this model where utilities can rate base the program costs of installation. However, once again, if not much revenue comes charge utilization on a site, and there's not budget for operation and maintenance and repair. Again, the maintenance costs might exceed the expected profit or revenues that one would get from the charge utilization if a broken one gets repaired. And then lastly is a hybrid model, which like cost shares utilization revenue between the installation company and the site host. Less common, and again, it's kind of unclear how this may interact with charging reliability. Okay, final section. If we go to slide 13, which is just that some errors within a charging station may not be instantly or immediately accessible to be reported by the charging company. So that would mean that there are some payment system errors, some unmonitored failures, vandalism, etc., that are undetectable from a network operation. So that contributes to, I mentioned the San Francisco study earlier, which showed that despite recording high uptimes, the charges in the San Francisco area suffered reliability issues. So there's a discrepancy there, and that's because of some of the data collection methodology. So a potential solution that the California Energy Commission proposed for their kind of reliability standards is the successful charge attempt rate, that's SCAR. Basically, that values charges and kind of creates a standardization scheme on the frequency successful charges. So it's attempt-based rather than time-based, as is uptime. There's like, if you can get a charge that that counts towards that raises the successful charge attempt rate. And I can go into more detail on that, but in the interest of time, I'll stop there and you can look into it. Great, that's my presentation, very short, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so I asked Alex to write us a white paper up on EVSE business models and why they may or may not have economic incentive to keep the charging stations working at a high reliability, and maybe help us try to understand maybe why we might be needing these kind of regulations. And so I had also asked them to run that by both Josh and Matt before the meeting so that they could kind of give us some feedback as a group. And then after they talk, I'm going to give the other EVSCs on the call about 5 minutes to kind of talk through other additional thoughts they may have for the members. And then I'll give us about 5 minutes of the members to talk. Go ahead, and Josh and Matt, if you have anything you want to add.
Matt, I can jump in. In the interest of time, because I did take 20 minutes or so with the two of you, I'm happy to just say thank you for this work that you've done, Alex, in putting this together. I think it's a good foundation that could probably benefit if some other folks take a look at it and try and refine it a bit more. But I think it gets to kind of like the core question, which is, if uptime is so important from an economic perspective, why aren't charging providers keeping these stations up, right? And the answer is it's a lot more complicated than that. So anyway, that's all for me for now. But thanks for putting that together.
Yeah, thank you. I very much agree with Josh. I think it's a good starting point for the discussion. Definitely appreciate your willingness to look at the range of different business models that exist in the industry. There's clearly a little bit more of a shift in the direction of owner-operator, but site host is very common, especially for level 2 chargers. And so I think we need to see, what additional approaches we can take that support operations and maintenance, whether it's warranty or service level agreements and so on. I know there are discussions in some other states that are trying to look a little bit beyond SCAR or uptime too. And certainly, as we hear more of how those proposals are getting, fully fleshed out, we'll be glad to share that information too. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up to non-EVSE members. If you want to just raise your hand or say something in the chat, I'll call on you. Go ahead, Caitlin. EVGO.
Hi, everyone. This is Caitlin at EVGO. So we are primarily working under the owner-operator model, and I do want to just point out that for us, we do rely on customer utilization to recover costs associated with our charging stations. So in that way, there is a direct motive to ensure our chargers are reliable. And we even last year launched EVGO Renew, which is our comprehensive maintenance program designed to make sure all our stations across our network meet our quality and technology standards. So working to actively replace, upgrade, or in some cases retire stations over the coming years in the goal of enhancing our charger reliability. Happy to answer any questions, but just wanted to speak to our business model.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. Others? Mal, ChargePoint.
Hey everyone, this is Mal Scarron with ChargePoint. Thank you, Alex, for the presentation and starting this conversation. I wanted to talk a little bit about ChargePoint's perspective on the site host owned model and add an element that I think is important to consider when you're looking at that model. Which is we see our customers invest in charging for a variety of reasons. So a workplace might be trying to offer a benefit to their workers, a hotel is trying to attract guests, a convenience store is trying to sell you a Snickers bar while you wait for your car to be done charging. You know, there are lots of different reasons that this site host owned model is of interest. And in each of those cases, we find that a bad driver experience reflects poorly on the entity who's hosting the charger. So fundamentally, if you're going to a grocery store to do your shopping because it has charging and that charging is broken or not available for you to use, you know, you're going to start making a different decision and you're not going to be going to that store anymore. The same is true if you're taking a stop on a road trip, and if you think that hamburger chain A has more reliable charging than hamburger chain B, that's going to impact your decision of where you refuel your vehicle, and then, you know, what else you might be doing on site as you're waiting for that to happen. So I guess the point there is that customer trust and customer loyalty may not be direct financial incentives in the way that Alex discussed, but we think that their absence does have a direct financial impact for the kinds of customers that are increasingly installing charging services, and think that that is going to be a factor that plays into reliability as well. So thanks again for the opportunity to provide some input.
Definitely. And can you just repeat that last part again? Who do you think is missing? My apologies, I missed that.
Oh, I just said thank you for the opportunity to provide input, because the element of customer loyalty is one that we see increasingly a consideration for the entities that ChargePoint serves in the site host owned model.
Okay, got it. No, thank you. All right. Anyone else who wants to speak up? Okay. Are there any members that have questions for any of the EVSEs on the call, or for Alex about his presentation? All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and move into our, go ahead.
And just a procedural or process question. Next steps in terms of the kind of report that Alex has done, what are the next steps for that, if there are any?
So, yeah. So my plan for that is, first I'm going to have him circulate it with the non-EVSE or the non-members of the EVSE community to see what their feedback is, having now received both yours and Matt's. Once he had that, and me and him have gone through it and incorporated those, I'm going to circulate it to the group as kind of a white paper, like a knowledge paper. And if anyone has anything else they would think that we should look into, have that happen. But then I think what I was hoping for this conversation to do is kind of help inform the bedrock of when we're thinking through these whatever regulations or proposals that we come up with as a group. It helps kind of center that discussion around, okay, how do the companies make money? How do they operate so that we can, when we're designing any sort of paradigm, we're focused on that. So one, we don't go in the wrong direction, but two, we know we're maybe applying any pressure that we think we should apply in the right place. And so I think it's going to be really important for that enforcement discussion that we'll eventually need to have as a group. So I don't think there's any official what would I say, vote or anything we need to take on it unless somebody wants to do something with it now. What I do think we will do in the long run is it would be some portion of it would make it into the report. And that's when I think we would definitely have a vote on what portion of that background research that he's done makes it into the final report to the General Assembly.
Sounds good.
If that
Thanks.
makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks.
Ready. Let's see here. All right, so moving into our to the framework discussion. So I'd asked for some feedback on framework. I did hear back from 2 members, and I also included myself, so it's 3 on the draft framework document I circulated. And so to kind of start going, and what I'd like to do today is take about 20-25 minutes to go through this and find out, is there anything most importantly, is there anything that we think needs to be added that was not there? Then to start talking through priorities and comments people had about what was there in terms of edits. And then hopefully what I think we can start doing is, at least on the first issue in terms of who should maybe be in subject to such a framework, to start kind of narrowing that down, because I think over the next month and a half, or I would say over the next month and a half, 2 months, we need to start making decisions. And I think who might be subject to such a framework, we can start narrowing that now or within the next meeting. So we'll see how far we get in the about 20-ish minutes that we have for this, and then I'm going to pivot into the NEVI PSC rule discussion regarding uptime measurements, so that people have a background of what those 2 organizations have done on those issues. So when you all take that back over the next 2 weeks, you have something to work with. So with that, I'm going to head and hop in. So the comments I received, if we just walk from top to bottom, I'm going to start with the first issue, which is who should be subject to such a framework. The feedback I received was effectively was from myself, MDE, and Scott. So MDE's position when they sent it back to me was that the charging stations that are for public use and are not affiliated with the utility or state-owned should be subject to these rules. And then they had additional comments underneath that Virginia, I'll probably let you weigh in there. Scott, I think you were generally, if they charge people money, they should be under the framework. Do I have that summary correct? Correct. Yeah, and that's kind of also what. Okay, good. And then my thoughts were also similar. Somebody, hold on, I'm echoing, and that might be my fault. So give me a second. Why am I? If you're not on mute, go ahead and mute yourself. Yeah. All right. So and then yeah, my view was, if you're going to pay, if somebody's paying you money to charge at the station, you should probably be subject to this framework. Utilities, I can go either way on. Either they'll be subject to our rules, which we've already set up, or they would be subject to these new rules and would have to comply with whatever comes out of the future agency. So I'd be interested to hear from others on those. But before we dive into that, I guess I'll start with MDE. Any clarification you want to put out there? And then I'll go to Scott, then I'll open up to other members. So Virginia.
I'm sorry, you're asking for MDOT or for MDE?
Sorry, MDOT, my apologies.
Okay. So Ben, I feel a little at a disadvantage, and I think what I have is what Amanda, again, it's covering for Amanda. I'm not sure that I have on my screen. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing you say, just to recapsulate the question, is whether, what is it? Say it again.
Effectively,
Specifically.
if somebody, MDE's position that I got from Amanda is public use stations, not private fleet or residential charging, and also not utility or state owned. Anything that is not one of those four should be under the framework. And then you have a bit more detail down below regarding that personal use. And I just wanted to know if you had any clarification you wanted to give the group.
Yeah, okay, and I'm going to digest. I think what's confusing me is I think these are all MDOT comments characterized as MDE comments.
Sorry, these are MDOT comments. If I keep saying
okay.
MDE, my apologies. I probably mislabeled that.
No problem. Yes. I'm not sure I have a whole lot to elaborate on the spot. Only to say in general, I think anytime that certain chargers are exempt from something, I think there's sort of a lack of clarity that creeps in for that, which I think is not so good. But again, I'm not going to quibble with the specific wording that Amanda had sent in this minute.
Thank you. Scott, anything you want to add?
Well, I wasn't clear, but when I said you can classify chargers as fixable by the driver or not fixable. So fixable by the driver, I was conceiving those as single family homeowners. What I wrote here does not apply to the utility chargers, so they're under their own separate framework. So what I'm writing here is not in conflict with that. It overlaps that. So this is the personal use at single family property category.
Got it. And you're good with mud. What's your view? Do you have any view on common use mud charging stations?
Well, I would say that would be not fixable by the driver. So, a common level 2 charger that everybody uses at a multifamily property, that should be in the framework, because if it's not working, it's not like the driver can go and do something about it personally.
Okay. Even if the sale is not commercial, it's just a pass through.
Yeah, because it's supposed to duplicate what a single family homeowner would deal with. So, but a single family homeowner can replace the charger if need be, or upgrade it or something. And, one person out of a multifamily housing development can't replace the charger. So.
Yep. No, thank you for that. All right. Other members? Go ahead, Josh.
Thanks. And I confess I have not yet gone through this to offer written comments, so I'm behind on that. But kind of a couple high-level thoughts. One is that to the extent it makes sense to harmonize standards across the state, so that the utility funded chargers don't have one set of standards for uptime, et cetera, and then MEA chargers have a different standard. I mean, that it would just create unnecessary headaches. And so as a kind of like guiding principle or North Star to where I think it makes sense to head, we should start with that. But the second point is we should give ourselves flexibility as specific things come up, so that we can say, just kind of like what you're getting at now, like should privately accessible chargers, be subject to the same standards. We might find that there are nuances even within use cases, like multifamily chargers and dedicated versus common area, et cetera, right? So I don't think we need to know all those distinctions now. And so maybe as, our work matures and gets to a point where we're, feeling comfortable about submitting recommendations, then we can have a better sense of, well, these make sense for this group, but actually maybe not for that group. So those are just kind of two high-level points. A third thing is a terminology question or point, which is is for us to kind of figure out what we mean when we say customer versus end user or driver. And depending on the context, obviously the customer could be different than the actual driver. And we don't need to figure that out right now. But that'll obviously help when we're figuring out who these standards should be applying to, or in what cases.
By that, you mean maybe if the customer is a commercial business with their fleet of trucks, or are you thinking, I guess, what other customer, just a couple examples or one example. So in terms of it,
Sure.
It's not the driver.
So just a couple examples. So for a utility program, the customer is typically the electricity account holder who may not be the driver, right? It could be a site host, or same with Switch. If we sell our product to a apartment building or office building, that is the customer, which is not the driver. And so both groups, customers in that case and drivers have needs, right? But they may be separate. So just understanding what we mean and clarifying will be helpful.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Other member feedback on who or who should not be subject to it. Just seems the general, still thinking about it for some. I think it's commercial or if there's commercial payments, or in Scott's, or under Scott's definition would be if the driver does not have the not a charger subject to their ability to fix, would be another possible one that we would look at. But those are broad ones. I saw you come off. I saw you come on camera, Allison. Go ahead.
Hi, Ben. Sorry I didn't get a chance to respond to the spreadsheet. I've been away on travel all week, but Maryland Department of Agriculture weights and measures, we specifically register devices such as the EV chargers used in the very end consumer transactions. So that's any transaction used to establish a charge. But we wouldn't oversee state highway, because we don't oversee the state highway gas pumps, so to speak. But we would register the devices used in commercial transaction. That would include when it's fleet refueling, just for an example, and there's multiple companies using a specific dispenser for fleet refueling, such as in a truck application, like at a Corals Petroleum, we regulate those particular locations and those devices. So that would be Maryland Department of Agriculture weights and measures stands on what device we would register and regulate, but we would not register or regulate anything used for personal use.
Got it. Yeah, I think probably when we recirculate this again, I might, before I do that, bug you to see if Handbook 44, you have an explicit definition you might want me to give people, so that they know where you're all at in terms of who you would put under the Handbook 44 regime. And then we can maybe use that to align our definitions or not. But at least it gives everyone a framework, a reference frame.
Okay, and I did include exactly the type of devices or what we register per state statute as well in my PowerPoint presentation.
Excellent. And then I can plagiarize right out. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Others. All right, go ahead and moving down. Keep moving. Next item was registering qualified EV charging stations. And the three questions in terms of the framework that we could possibly discuss, because obviously we need to get them registered, but there's basically existing and new. One would be, how do I get existing companies registered? Two, when should it be effective for them to be registered with us in terms of what's my grace period really to get them under the rules? And then the final one would be, how do I make sure new companies know what to do? Those were the three possible outcomes. I think it looks like me and MDOT were thinking possibly after 1 year. We would have a 1 year grace period, and that's something the group can take back and think about. And then there's other notes here as well from Scott and MDOT in terms of where we might be able to figure out how they register. And I am also thinking we might want to look at how Department of Ag is going to do this for Handbook 44 as a starting point as well. So open it up. Any thoughts or statements about registering qualified EV stations? I would also say in terms of things that this group should focus on, I don't view this, I think that we need to think about definitely the grace period that was required in the law for us to think about. But this also feels like something where I would probably say it needs to be in the framework, but maybe that's something the implementing agency, once determined, would figure out in terms of how they would do it. Maybe we would give them a couple recommendations inside the report. But in terms of the breadth of issues that we have to cover, maybe this one isn't as high up in terms of something that needs to be solved today. But so that's just food for you all to think about when I send this back out. Go ahead, Virginia.
More of a comment or question, and maybe if I'm directing this to Ag, on the issue of the AFDC database. I guess I have sort of a practical question when it comes to, as I understand it, all the EV service providers, there's a requirement that they upload their location data for all public chargers to the AFDC database. There's a mechanism for that. There's a process, there's a time sequence, et cetera. My question, I guess, is just as a practical matter, how does that process, which is directly from charging station provider to this federal Department of Energy process, how does a state process interject in that? Is there sharing between federal and state? Is there sort of automatic sharing? It's really it's a question I just don't have visibility how that could work. I think it seems implied here in the answers to these questions that to have the Department of Agriculture kind of do a certain process based on the same data that's in the AFDC, but how do we make sure they are in fact the same points, the same chargers, the same list? And I remember when a couple months ago, we had that grant I mentioned earlier, the EVSE ROTS, the broken chargers. And so everybody was directed to this massive database to say, well, what are the broken chargers in the state of Maryland? We looked, and we actually discovered many of them on the list tagged by the feds as broken. In fact, were not broken. They were only behind a gate or something like that. There's some way they were not publicly accessible. So it just was a reminder of when it comes to lists of these inventories that change frequently, how does this done sort of seamlessly and efficiently? Anyway, and maybe it's rhetorical. I'm not sure I have expecting an answer on the spot. It's just more of a question I wanted to float out, that the practicality of it seems kind of an important detail for administering this.
So this question was directed to Maryland Department of Agriculture. We don't actually regulate that database. We don't have a website. That's not my department. We don't have a website that states how many devices are up online at any point in time. Yeah. Instead, what we would do is when we add the device registration category, which hopefully will be next year, say it goes into effect October 1st of 2025. We would give them a requirement such as within 30 days or such to comply, contact our department. We would want to know who the responsible party was of, let's say, 8 charging ports at this particular location. We would open an account. They would pay the actual associated fees as required per the device registration categories. And then as time permits, my inspectors would be assigned specific areas to go out and conduct these routine inspections. So what we need to do is acquire the standards used for the test procedures. We need to get our inspectors trained in these proper test procedures. And then we would house the actual inspection data in our database. So we actually have two databases, one database which stores all of our accounts. So that means grocery store scales, gas pumps, vehicle scales, grain moisture meters. They're stored by account. So let's say, just example, Wawa on Route 50 at a particular location is registered for 32 Type 7s. Type 7s are small liquid measuring devices, your basic gas pumps. We would assign, depending upon the last date of inspection, the assignment to an inspector to go conduct a routine inspection. They would then enter the account number into our inspection database system, enter in the devices, conduct the inspections, record the inspection findings, whether they're accurate and correct, or whether they're rejected, condemned, or red tag. And that's all stored within our private database. That's not something that's just open for the public to review at any point in time. But that is for our regulatory authority to know exactly what the status of those devices are. And they're actually given 10 days to repair these devices. Now, when I say 10 days, we're looking more at 2 weeks, just because it doesn't really specify 10 business days or 10 regular days. So we usually give them about 2 weeks to at least initiate the process of repairing these particular devices. And then we'll return to check on the status of repairs and to certify that repairs have been made accurately and correctly. But we don't actually regulate any particular database that states these charges are available for use, just like we don't do that for gas stations. We essentially register these devices. They pay the associated registration fees depending upon who's responsible. So like a Safeway is responsible for all their scales, or the Wegmans, let's say in Towson's responsible for 64 scales registered to that particular department. They're required to pay their device registration fees on an annual basis. Per Maryland state statute, device owners are required to maintain their devices. Maryland Department of Agriculture does not maintain devices for them. Instead, they're required by law to maintain their own devices to ensure that they're accurate, correct, and working properly. That's per Maryland law. What we do is we go in and ensure that these devices are working as designed, functioning, that they're accurate and correct, and then we certify them. And you'll see our little stickers on dispensers and such. There's no guidelines within state statute as to inspection parameters. I'm sure you can do the math with 66,000 devices and 18 positions. We aim to get to each and every device once every 2 to 3 years if possible. We would have to increase our actual department by probably 30 to 40 pins to do each and every device on an annual basis, and that's not including EV dispensers. So, and of course, they're growing in significance quickly. So, but the device owner is required by law to maintain their devices. That means they're operating, they're accurate, they're correct. If they note a problem, they're required to fix it. They shouldn't have to wait for us to come along and say, hey, there's a problem here. You know, the screen's busted out, the customer can't see it, or the charging cord's broken, the customer can't plug in to charge. But they're required to maintain their devices. So hopefully that answers your question. But we do, like I said, we do adopt NIST Handbook 44 in its current edition as written in state statute. And 3.40. Electric vehicle fueling systems became a permanent code in NIST Handbook 44 on January 1st of 2023. So technically we've had the authority since then. We've not had the funding, unfortunately, since we were all special funded to purchase the standards and start actively inspecting and registering the devices. So our next step is to we already have an idea how we're going to move forward with this. We already have our tolerances and our specifications and our requirements. Everything is already within Handbook 44, which is adopted in statute. However, we really need to get some form of funding to be able to fund these inspection activities and purchase of standards. So that's kind of going to be our next step, hopefully, in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. And I know we're getting a little short on time, so I'm going to, and I think most members, it sounds like, need to sit with the framework again, and I will make a request that everyone definitely gets me feedback over the next one or be prepared to go through these. So I'm just going to hit these pretty quick, unless somebody has something they want to add. The first, so data reporting and tracking, the feedback, I guess something I was curious about was on the data and reporting, which is another one of the framework questions where I was like, we need it. It's very important. Also, how much of this needs to go into statute and or recommended regulation versus how much of this is that the implementing agency needs to figure out in terms of, we say, these are the standards that need to happen. You figure out how to collect that. And instead, we maybe analyze somebody like California who's going to have to be doing this. So that's going to be something I'll ask you all to think about. Scott, you said posting data to certain websites should be good enough. And I guess the AFDC, the Alternative Fuels Data Center, or I think it is. I know that made it into the law. I guess it sounds like that also impacts MDAs. So I guess what I wasn't clear to me was, since that was a federal database, if in terms of, let's say we come up with a bunch of stuff that we want reported from these stations, or maybe not a lot we want reported from these stations, does the AFDC have their own set of information that they want reported? I guess I don't really know what they collect. And so I was just curious in terms of, if we were to say, here's a report of data, if that's actually useful, or if we'd be setting our charging stations up in Maryland to have to report stuff that's had a different standard. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't set AFDC apart for any special reason. I just thought that was the requirement. Isn't it?
It's in the
If you
law,
look,
so I think.
Yeah. Okay, I just meant, I mean, yeah, comply with the law. Just post to the required places.
Okay, I think Matt, you just dropped something in the chat.
Just really quick. I think in addition to AFDC, which really helps from finding stations, they have a good station location tool online. But there's also a new federal initiative to create a charging analytic and reporting tool that gathers, I think, required data under the NEVI program. So I put the link in there.
Got it. Thanks. So I guess we'll need to think, when we're talking about data and what should be collected, we should probably, I can try and see what we can survey ahead of the next meeting so that we can kind of think about, to make sure we're not just creating standards when there's another standard, like basically having 3 different reporting standards under one framework. Okay. So going through the data enforcement, I think enforcement is going to be one of our key issues that this group is going to need to wrestle with. And then I guess Virginia and MDOT was looking for some proactive enforcement as well on this issue. And then Scott, you were recommending a compliance plan before there are any sort of penalties. But I think this is going to be a question about incentives versus penalties in the long run. Any feedback you two want to give to the group? Quick.
No, I mean, it's pretty clear. I mean, we should start with an action plan. I mean, you know, I don't want to start with fines or anything like that. I mean, the ultimate interest is just simply solving the problem, so as easy as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have nothing to add here.
Okay. Other members? All right. business unit administrative needs. I didn't get really much feedback from any of the parties. My only comment was we'll definitely need to take some time to think about budgets, and I think that will be a little bit of a homework assignment I will have for people to think about before the next meeting. Not dollars and cents, but more or less what you think you will need to take that back and then start calculating dollars and cents. So I'll talk about that at the end of the meeting here. Give deference to NEVI, that's already in the law. I think Handbook 44 might be coming in pretty hot on the tails of NEVI in terms of something that we need to be looking at giving deference to, especially after that presentation from Allison. And then we'll have to decide who, but not a lot of feedback right now, though. MDOT, it looks like you have a preference for one agency housing all of this at the end of the day. All right.
That's right. And I think
anyone,
that's just for administrative efficiency, Ben. I think that was the thought, just administrative, clarity.
right.
That was
All
our
right.
opinion.
Any other feedback on the framework? I guess most importantly, is there anything people think that we need to talk about that wasn't in there? And this is not regarding measuring uptime. This is more or less nuts and bolts how this all, the whole kit and caboodle would work in terms of high level issues. All right. So what I will go ahead and do is I will re-ask for people to give feedback again. I will ask everyone, we will need to start locking down or starting to come up with tentative recommendations at our next meeting. Those won't be holding anyone in stone, but we will need to start, moving through subjects and making some decisions from a high level. That's in terms of preliminary ideas. So definitely sit down with these, try to get feedback to the group. I'm always happy to sit down and talk with people. So at a time if you can, so we can run through these in the next meeting. I did put aside time to talk through how the PSC and MDOT were handling. There's a large laundry list of things in the law that said we as a group had to go through. Most of them had to do with time measurements and station operations. Obviously, 10 minutes is not enough time to dedicate to such a discussion. I wanted to make sure that there was a chance for public feedback. So this time around, I am going to ask for feedback from everyone in this group, similar to think about stuff ahead of time. I'm going to definitely volunteer myself as somebody if you have questions about any of those questions, whether it be what MDOT or what the PSC is doing, please reach out to me. Virginia, I'm going to volunteer MDOT as being also willing to talk to any member about what you all are doing ahead of time. So if somebody wants to walk through anything, I will make myself available. I will say for those of you, this workbook does actually have the NEVI federal rules in here. So there's from the CFR. I did put that in this document and a link to it online. So you can see what the NEVI rules say definitively. And I also tried to summarize under D and E, or MDOT summarized for us under D and I summarized under E, how we were implementing those today. So that you all can get a view on some of this. But similar to what we just did, the questions will be, what should we be focusing on? Should we be regulating it? Any questions on that? But I will be asking for feedback this go around from everyone instead of just cursory thoughts. All right. So we're at the public comment time in the meeting. So those who would like to speak, go ahead and either raise your hand or put something in the chat and I will call on you. All right. 10 seconds to see if there's anyone who wants to speak up. All right, not seeing anyone. So our next meeting is going to be August 5th, 1 to 3. In the interim, the things I will be definitely asking, I'll summarize this in an email. One, definitely feedback on the framework. We need to make sure that we have everything in there that we need to be focusing on, and then start slimming down and or locking down those issues. Next would be initial feedback on the uptime measurement discussions within the document. Initial thoughts, initial priorities, initial how you think it might work. Not holding anyone to anything right now on these things. This is really just make sure we get ideas out there and kind of get tentative ideas from each member and importance of issues. Also, state agencies. One of the outcomes of this is one of the 3 core tenets of what we are doing is figuring out which of us may, if this legislature wants to statutorily require such a framework, who should be in charge. And part of that is going to be a budget, I'm assuming. And those 2 questions will be, 1, how much money? 2, how would they fund it? Assume through fees or something like that, but that's a discussion we will have. But obviously, in August, I will probably be asking each of us to take back what we think of the framework and think through how much you think it would cost for you to do it. But that's not the question for the next 2 weeks. The question for the next 2 weeks is, what do you think you need, you don't know that you think you need to know to be able to do such an assessment? So that basically, if we don't have the information, we can try to figure it out, so then you can take it back and come up with a line item. So if you were told you're in charge of everything, what would that look like? Finally, I think we're going to need to integrate more of Handbook 44 into these discussions than I originally thought. I thought Handbook 44 was going to be a much more standalone topic that MDA was going to be able to walk away, and that was going to be their area. But there's a lot of crossover I'm finding. And so, Allison, I might be working with you. I will be reaching out to you in between now and the next meeting to see to get a better handle on the overlap. I'll use your presentation of what you just talked about, but for that uptime measurement framework discussion, because I think there's a number of items that you all will be enforcing that I did not think was part of your area of expertise. So anyway, I think that will be something that we'll need to talk through over the couple meetings to make sure that we're not cross-pollinating anything. So those are going to be the 4 things I think that are going to happen between now and the next meeting. Anything else members want to see happen before the next meeting or at the next meeting? All right, well, I will be sending out a summary of what happened in this meeting, request for the next meeting. Now we'll talk to you all on August 5th. Thank you.
Hey, Ben, can I just jump in and ask, will you also be sharing the slide decks that the agencies presented?
Yes, I can do that. Agencies, please send me your slides today, and I will get that circulated. Yes, I will try and get that all circulated to the members.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yep. All right. Anything else? Well, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for your time.
Thank
you.
You too.
Thank you.